Today we're going to talk about a couple different aspects of the internet and computer networks. Cookies and the cloud. These two things actually don't have a whole lot to do with each other. We're just going to bundle them into one video. I guess what they have in common is they are involved in the internet. So first let's talk about cookies. Let's look at a basic diagram again of a browser connecting to a web server. Here we see again a basic diagram of how the web works. A browser software is installed on a user's computer. There's a web server out on the internet for a specific website. The browser issues a request to the website. The web server for that site finds the applicable files, sends them back as a response. Basic process, and we've looked at that a few different times. Now, one thing to cover about how the web works, about the internet works as well, is a concept of what's called state. One of the regular definitions of the word state essentially is the condition of a thing at any point in time. That's actually the definition that's at play when we talk about the web. And here's what I mean specifically. When the browser requests a web page, what that web page is, in its essence, is a static file. There is a .html file, as we've covered before. That HTML, when sent back to the browser, can be used to create the displayed web page. But here's the thing. Each time a browser asks for that web page and the web page gets sent back, happens all by itself in a specific unit of time. If you request a web page and then 5 minutes later request that web page again, the fact that you requested it 5 minutes before isn't a known piece of data. In addition, this website usually is not something that's just used as a glorified brochure site with static pictures. There's some usability to it. It needs certain information about the user. What's their account number? What type of a user are they? Are there any particular services or products that the website represents that they have considered popular or they're interested in or that they have purchased before? Now, those are things that change over time. The state of those properties, if you will, is not necessarily the same all the time. Let's just take a real basic one. What if you wanted to know whether or not someone who visited your website had actually ever bought anything from you? If your website was something where they could buy. Now, there's a few different things that matter there that involve state or the condition of a thing. One would be, who's the person? In other words, what's their username? What's their password? How do you uniquely identify that that is that person? And how do you identify that they are actually an active, allowed, authorized user of your account? So that's a piece of data to which state would apply. Are they in fact an active member of your account on your website at any point in time? Then there's the one of, have they ever bought anything? Here, active means, are they allowed to buy? Have they ever bought is, have they ever bought anything from you? So these elements are considered state elements. So let's pretend we didn't have a way to store this information at all. And Bob logs onto your website where he can buy canoes. And he peruses the canoes and eventually buys one. Now, a day later, Bob logs onto your website and is perusing the canoes. Let's say that you internally would like to offer him a discount if he's a current customer. How do you know he is? That speaks to state, the condition of a thing at any point in time. His condition now on day 2 is different at the beginning of day 1 because on day 1 he hadn't bought anything, on day 2 he has. So that data needs to be stored somewhere. And there are a few different solutions. One of them, and this brings us around to the idea of a cookie, is this. What if the first time Bob orders a canoe off of your site, along with the response, you send a small file, and this file can get stored on Bob's computer, and it records who the user is, the fact that it's Bob, and the fact that he has in fact bought something from you. The next time Bob visits your website, Bob's browser will issue a request, hey, show me those pictures of canoes. The web server can send a response back to the browser that says, all right, I'd like to do that. I really would. But first, can you check to see if you have a file from my web server? And if you do have that file, can you check to see whether it indicates whether Bob has bought anything or not? That information will be found on the person's computer and sent back to the web server. Now the web server knows to change the content of the web page and send back a page where part of it says to Bob, congratulations, as an existing customer, you're authorized 150% discount. We'll pay you to shop. Well, probably wouldn't do that or they lose money. But you get the idea. They would be able to change the data sent back to the browser based on the state of that user. And the state here is, have they bought or not? The file that's sent from the web browser to be stored on the individual's computer is called a cookie. Some of you may know this data already. Some of you may have seen the word cookie referred to on different websites. For some of you, this may be completely new. A cookie is essentially a file that can be stored on the browser's computer to store data that a web server would need about certain state information. Now, what kind of things would you want to save in a cookie? What kind of things would you want in this file? Well, it varies wildly. It totally depends on what the purpose of the website is, what the users are using it for. But typical things might be if you are browsing an online catalog of clothing, the cookie might save a history of every item that you've looked at before, so that when you log onto that website again, it could have a little spot at the bottom that says previously viewed items, for example. The possibilities are endless. In fact, the creator of the website itself is the person who programs what data is going to be in that file because they're the one that needs it. Now let's add a little bit of complication to this and discuss a concept called a third-party cookie. If you think about the primary way this works, you have two parties involved. You have the user, Bob, and you have the website he's going to. This is his primary site that he goes to. Just for the purposes of this illustration, Bob happens to be visiting canoes.com. This is two people, two parties, if you will. Let's see how we can add a third party in. Let's say that the website kayaks.com has learned that it's really smart to find out who visits canoes.com because people buy canoes, buy kayaks. And they work an arrangement out with canoes.com that when Bob visits canoes.com, canoes.com sends 2 cookies onto Bob's computer. One is the canoes.com cookie, used for whatever it needs to for its own internal operation, keep track of canoes he's browsed, whatever, right? The other one is actually a cookie for kayaks.com. And that cookie contains code that will let kayaks.com know that Bob browsed. Now, let's move a little farther forward. Let's say there's another website, bicycles.com. And Bob visits bicycles.com. It's like, okay, cool. I want to check out some bicycles. And let's say kayaks.com has also clued into the fact that it's really smart to know who shops at bicycles.com because they like to buy kayaks. And so they do the same thing. They say, hey, listen, in addition to your own cookie, can you put a kayak cookie on the computer of people that visit you? And so Bob visits bicycles.com. And sure enough, 2 cookies get installed on his machine. The bicycles.com and another kayak.com cookie. Now, this cookie also reports to kayaks.com, hey, this guy Bob, he's been on 2 affiliated websites. Now they're going to do with that whatever they want. If they're using it for marketing purposes, they'll probably try to find a way to identify Bob, or at least his computer, and get their advertisements over to him. Because again, they might think it's likely that people buy canoes or bicycles might buy kayaks. Again, this is called a third-party cookie because the primary two parties involved, there's a third one that comes in. Primary parties at first are Bob and his computer and canoes.com. Two different parties. Second time around, Bob's computer and bicycles.com. Two different parties. A third party he never visits has worked out an arrangement to get their cookie onto his computer twice. Each time they visit an affiliated web server that kayaks.com has set up an arrangement with. That's a third-party cookie. Now let's talk about the cloud. Many of you have heard this term. Some of you may have some concept of what it is. I actually think one of the best ways to explain this is with a silly t-shirt that I see quite often. And it says, there is no cloud. There's just someone else's computer. And that's actually true. The cloud is a broad general concept. It's only been around for a few years. But in general, what it means is utilizing computers that are located somewhere beyond your actual physical location for services. Let's look at a couple examples. Let's look at a typical scenario. Let's say we have a manufacturing company called Acme Industries. This company has their physical headquarters, big building. This company also wants to have a website. And it's going to be a rather large, complex website. Every single product they make, whether it's a giant anvil or a fake roadway that you paint onto the side of a cliff, all of these products need to be featured on the website. So they have to make a decision. Are they going to have an actual web server in their building and have a person who runs that website who's in their building? Let's call them the webmaster. They could do that. They could go out and buy a large computer that's been optimized as a web server. You can buy a web server. You can go on to Amazon right now and buy a web server. Let's say they do that. They're quite expensive. And guess what? They generate a lot of heat. And they usually need a special room with lots of air conditioning to cool that machine down. Because remember, the computer in here is potentially handling thousands of people logging into the web server at once to check out Acme's products. And every time someone logs in, work is done by that computer, which actually, because it uses electricity, generates heat. These computers put off a lot of heat. You may have had the experience of touching your laptop or an actual desktop computer and feeling lots of heat generated from it. Multiply that times about 300 to 500 sometimes, and now you have a server. They can put off a lot of heat. So now you've got this big special room you have to construct and an air conditioning system that it cannot go down, because if it's down for more than about a half an hour, this thing can overheat and shut down and cause damage. There's a lot to this. Now, there's nothing wrong with doing this. This is how it was done for decades. If someone needed a very powerful computer or computers on premises, at their site, if you will, then they would build a facility to put them in. They'd buy the servers, the computers. They would hire somebody to manage the physical equipment and the actual content on those computers. And they managed it all in-house. Or again, the word is on premises. Premises is your actual location or your home, the place you're operating from. Well, about 10 years ago, the idea came out of a concept called the cloud. It wasn't called the cloud at first, but this is the concept. Let's say you're a company that just wants to do the following. You just want to buy a bunch of servers and you want to rent them out. Acme, instead of doing all this and managing everything in-house, could say, hey, could you dedicate one of your servers to be an Acme server? And we'll direct all the traffic of all our internal employees who need it and all of our external users who want to check out all of our products. We'll direct all that traffic over to your server and you manage it for us. You keep it in a secure facility that's got all the proper equipment and air conditioning, and we'll just make sure that we change out the files on there as we need be, but we don't want to have to deal with that physical hardware anymore. Can you do that for us? And the companies looked at it and went, oh, wow, well, we can buy these better if we buy them in bulk, buy them cheaper. We can have a big old facility that's its sole purpose is just to keep all these servers running well. And if we economize on it, and hire someone that's an expert in those, we could have one guy run a whole bunch of servers, and then we rent them out and we can make money. Cool. So they did it. Now, this is one example of the cloud, but it's a very common one. And again, the basic concept. An individual or a company can essentially rent out physical hardware owned by someone else and located wherever that company wants to put it to perform computing services for them. And that computing service can be something like hosting their website. It can be running different programs for the company. But the point is this: now that that thing isn't physically located where you are, you lose the direct oversight of the actual physical equipment, but you gain a lot less money. It costs less money for you to get that service. And you also don't have to have dedicated employees. So again, there's the basic concept of the cloud, and there's a lot more to it. You'll learn a lot more. You'll probably be doing a lot of development that involves the cloud, but there's the essential concept. One final note about the cloud. It isn't going away. This concept of essentially leasing out or farming out the physical hardware you're going to use is becoming more and more an integral part of how companies and individuals do business. As an example, as a software developer, you can actually do the following. The computer programs that you use to make computer programs can actually be hosted out on a server here in the cloud. And you, from your computer, can log in there and operate that software on someone else's computer. You can create software using special programs that are designed to make software, and you're not even doing it on your machine. You're using a machine in the cloud. Now, you do need access to the internet to do that, because that's how you're going to connect to this remote computer. But you can do that. It's a relatively common practice for software developers. So get used to the cloud. It's going to be around a while.